I'll just say one thing, get ready for what's coming, because Wisconsin is far more surprising and way crazier than you might think. And by the time we get to the final facts, you'll understand exactly what I mean. 50. Wisconsin's total area is larger than many think. Wisconsin covers just over 65,000 square miles when you combine land and water, making it larger than countries such as Ireland or Lithuania. When you picture Wisconsin on a map, it doesn't feel that big, but once you start comparing landmass, the size becomes clearer. If you were to drive from the southern border to the northernmost tip without stops, it would feel like traveling across multiple small European countries stacked together. 49. The state has two major coastlines. While the word coastline usually makes people think of oceans, Wisconsin enjoys the shores of both Lake Michigan and Lake Superior. The Lake Michigan coastline alone is about 1,000 miles long if you trace every bend, and the Lake Superior side adds hundreds more. That means Wisconsin has more coastal access than several states on the eastern seaboard. This dual coast setup not only influences the climate, but also creates distinct local environments. Towns on the Lake Superior side tend to be windier and cooler, while Lake Michigan communities often have milder winter temperatures thanks to the huge thermal mass of the water. 48. Door County has one of the highest concentrations of lighthouses in the country. Door County sits on a peninsula jutting into Lake Michigan, and it contains more than a dozen historic lighthouses. The unique shape of the peninsula, with long stretches of rocky shore and hidden reefs beneath the surface of the water, created a need for these navigational structures. Sailing around Door County's waters can feel like navigating the edges of a massive stone hand reaching into the lake. When compared to popular lighthouse states like Maine, Door County holds its own, despite being far from the ocean. 47. Wisconsin contains an unexpected number of islands. Most people don't associate Wisconsin with islands, yet the Apostle Islands National Lakeshore offers more than 20 islands scattered across Lake Superior. These islands range from large forested stretches of land to tiny rocky outcrops. Their arrangement creates a maze-like environment with sea caves, sand beaches, and cliffs. When viewed from the air, the Apostles look almost like someone dropped a handful of pebbles into the lake and froze the moment of impact. It's one of the most island-rich freshwater areas in the world. 46. The driftless area was never flattened by glaciers. Southwestern Wisconsin is home to what geographers call the driftless area, a region untouched by the last major glaciation. Instead of flat plains, it features deep valleys, tall bluffs, and ridges that resemble some parts of Appalachia. When you stand in this region, the land feels older and more rugged than the rest of the Midwest. The driftless area also contains cold water springs that support trout habitat, making it ecologically distinct. Before continuing, be sure to subscribe to discover hidden stories and curiosities about every US state that no one else will tell you. 45. Wisconsin has over 15,000 lakes. The number is sometimes debated because definitions vary, but Wisconsin easily boasts more than 15,000 named and unnamed lakes. That is more lakes than Minnesota if you include every body of water that meets Wisconsin's measurement criteria. In many counties, you can't drive more than a few minutes without encountering a lake or pond. This saturation of freshwater shapes recreation, tourism, and even the layout of certain communities. It also creates microclimates, since large bodies of water hold heat and affect local wind patterns. 44. The Wisconsin River cuts the state nearly in half. Stretching more than 400 miles, the Wisconsin River runs from the far northern forests to the Mississippi River in the southwest. Its path is so central that the river almost acts as a geographical spine, influencing where towns developed and how early transportation routes formed. The river also created sandstone formations along its path, most famously at Wisconsin Dells. The contrast between the calm, wide stretches of the river and the narrow, cliff-lined areas in the Dells region shows just how varied a single waterway can be. 43. Lake Winnebago is one of the largest inland lakes in the country. Lake Winnebago covers about 215 square miles, making it larger than many small coastal bays in the United States. Its shallow depth gives it a completely different character compared to deep glacial lakes. Because sunlight reaches much of its bottom, aquatic plants flourish, supporting an impressive fish population. The lake plays a huge economic and recreational role. especially in winter when sturgeon spearers gather across its frozen surface. If you laid Lake Winnebago over a city like Chicago, it would extend well beyond the urban core. 42. The Chain o' Lakes region contains some of the densest lake clusters in America. Located in central Wisconsin, the Chain o' Lakes area features more than 20 interconnected lakes within a remarkably small geographic radius. If you were to place these lakes on top of a major metropolitan area, they would cover entire neighborhoods. The region's water channels create a landscape where you can travel long distances entirely by boat. The lakes also have remarkably clear water due to natural filtration from surrounding wetlands and springs. 41. Wisconsin's highest natural point isn't very tall, but it's surrounded by rolling land. Timms Hill stands at only about 1,151 feet above sea level. While that might not impress people from mountainous states, the area around Timms Hill is elevated relative to much of Wisconsin, giving it a surprising vantage point. On clear days, you can see miles of forested land, which looks like waves of green frozen in place. The surrounding region illustrates Wisconsin's transition from lowland plains to more rugged northern topography. 40. The northern forest region covers nearly half the state. The northern counties are part of a massive forested zone that stretches across the upper Midwest. This forest acts like a giant carbon absorber and is home to countless lakes, marshes, and rivers formed by ancient glaciers. When you compare the forested part of Wisconsin to the rest of the state, the north almost looks like a different world, and with dense woodland giving way only occasionally to small towns. It also influences climate, making the northern region significantly cooler. 39. Wisconsin has more miles of rivers than many larger states. With over 2,600 miles of rivers and streams, Wisconsin surpasses several states that are physically larger. The dense network of waterways reflects the glacially shaped terrain and high water table. These rivers carve through sandstone, flow across marshes, and wind through forests. If stretched into a straight line, Wisconsin's waterways could wrap halfway around the planet. Their distribution also means that nearly every county has access to canoeing or kayaking routes. 38. The Mississippi River forms Wisconsin's western border. The iconic Mississippi runs along the state's entire southwestern edge, defining both geography and ecology. The Mississippi in this region is wide, dotted with islands, and filled with backwaters. The border region forms tall bluffs that rise hundreds of feet above the river, creating scenery more dramatic than most people associate with Wisconsin. The combination of water, cliffs, and valleys makes this part of the state resemble landscapes found much farther south. 37. Wisconsin has one of the largest concentrations of spring-fed creeks in the Midwest. Cold, steady-flowing springs emerge from limestone and sandstone formations across central and southern counties. These springs feed clear, mineral-rich creeks that run year-round and maintain nearly constant temperatures. These conditions create habitats rarely found in surrounding states. When comparing spring density, Wisconsin ranks among the highest in the region, giving it an underground water system that rivals mountain states known for their springs. 36. The state's landscape includes both prairie and northern boreal ecosystems. Wisconsin sits at a geographical crossroads. The southern portion blends tall grass prairies and oak savannas, while the north transitions into boreal forest conditions. This creates a striking ecological divide. In one direction, the land opens into rolling prairie remnants, and in another, dense forests take over with tree species associated with colder climates. Few states have such a clean split between major ecosystem types, making Wisconsin geographically diverse despite its modest size. 35. Wisconsin's sandstone formations reveal a landscape carved by water. Sandstone bluffs, cliffs, and outcrops appear across the state, especially in central regions. These formations come from layers of ancient sediment compressed and sculpted by rivers and streams over long periods. Places like Baraboo and the Dells exhibit dramatic shapes, with pillars, gorges, and narrow passages. Compared to standard Midwestern flatlands, these sandstone features stand out dramatically, almost giving parts of Wisconsin a desert-like flavor in terms of rock shape, though surrounded by lush vegetation. 34. Wisconsin's glacial plains create some of the smoothest landscapes in the Midwest. Much of eastern and central Wisconsin is covered by glacial plains left behind after large sheets of ice moved across the region and later melted. These plains are remarkably smooth and subtly undulating, creating wide expanses that seem almost engineered for agriculture. If you've ever flown over the Midwest, these plains appear like neatly brushed velvet. The soil is deep, rich, and consistent across long stretches, which explains why farming thrives here. In contrast to the rugged, driftless area, these plains feel calm and orderly, a reminder of the massive natural forces that shape them. 33. The Kettle Moraine region is a natural sculpture garden of glacial features. Kettle Moraine cuts diagonally across southeastern Wisconsin, forming a collection of ridges, depressions, and hills created by glaciers pushing and dumping material during their retreat. Kettles, large pits formed by melting ice blocks, can be tens of feet deep, while moraines form long, curving ridges. Walking or driving through the region feels like moving across a frozen wave pattern carved into the earth. Few states have such an extensive display of glacial formations in one place. Compared to the flat surrounding areas, Kettle Moraine looks like an entirely different world sculpted by nature. 32. The state contains massive wetland complexes that rank among the largest in the nation. Wisconsin's wetlands cover millions of acres, making them a crucial part of the state's geography. Marshes, fens, bogs, and swamps appear across its landscape, particularly in the central and northern regions. These wetlands act like giant sponges, absorbing water, filtering runoff, and supporting diverse plant and animal life. In terms of wetland acreage, Wisconsin stands alongside states with far larger land areas. And some towns are built just minutes away from marshes that extend for miles, creating environments where land and water interlace in subtle, beautiful ways. 31. Lake Superior's Wisconsin shoreline is among the coldest freshwater coasts in the country. The waters along the northern edge of Wisconsin stay exceptionally cold, even during summer. This is because Lake Superior is deep and holds cold temperatures for long periods. If you compare it to Wisconsin's Lake Michigan shoreline, you'll find a dramatic difference. The Superior side can feel like stepping next to a refrigerated natural basin. These cold waters help form sea caves in the Apostle Islands, as winter ice repeatedly expands and contracts along the rock. 30. The eastern ridges and western valleys create a subtle tilt across the state. Wisconsin is higher in the north and west and slightly lower toward the south and east, creating a gentle but measurable tilt. This tilt affects how rivers drain, where wetlands form, and how storm systems move across the state. It also influences soil patterns, with certain crops thriving more consistently in one region than another. While you wouldn't notice it when driving, geographers can map the shift clearly. Compared to states with dramatic elevation changes, Wisconsin's tilt is modest, but it still shapes the natural layout. 29. Wisconsin has some of the most varied soil types in the Midwest. The state contains sandy soils, clay-rich layers, organic peat deposits, and loamy blends perfect for farming. These soils were formed through glacial activity, sedimentation, and plant decomposition. This diversity means that Wisconsin can support everything from cranberries and acidic bogs to vegetables in rich loam and pine forests in sandy regions. When you map the soil types across the state, it looks like a patchwork quilt of different earth tones. 28. Wisconsin's underground aquifers form one of the most reliable freshwater systems in the Midwest. Beneath the state lies a complex network of aquifers consisting of sandstone layers, limestone formations, and gravel-filled deposits left behind by glaciers. These aquifers supply water to communities large and small, delivering clean, mineral-rich groundwater. Compared to states where aquifers are quickly declining, Wisconsin's system remains relatively stable due to abundant recharge from rainfall and snowmelt. Although these aquifers stay hidden from sight, they shape the landscape by feeding springs, creeks, and wetlands. They act like the state's quiet, buried arteries that keep water flowing even during dry spells. 27. The state's climate zones vary sharply across short distances. Wisconsin includes several climate zones in a relatively small geographic area. The north experiences cooler temperatures and shorter growing seasons due to its forests and proximity to Lake Superior. The central portion has a more moderate climate influenced by wetlands and farmland. Along Lake Michigan, temperatures remain milder in winter and cooler in summer thanks to the lake's thermal effect. These differences can be significant. Areas just a few miles apart may have different frost dates or vegetation. The result is a patchwork of microclimates more varied than many larger states. 26. Wisconsin's landscape includes natural springs with extremely high water clarity. Many of Wisconsin's natural springs emerge from limestone or sandstone bedrock, allowing water to filter through rock layers before bubbling to the surface. This filtration creates exceptional clarity, often allowing observers to see several feet into the water. These springs feed trout streams, small lakes, and marshes across the state. In places where springs are concentrated, the water can appear bright blue due to mineral content. Compared to states known for mountain springs, Wisconsin's spring-fed waters hold their own in clarity and consistency. 25. The state is home to long, narrow ridges formed by ancient compression forces. Certain regions of Wisconsin contain elongated ridges made of quartzite or sandstone, as formed through ancient geological pressure. These ridges slice through the landscape in long lines, creating natural barriers and elevated viewpoints. Although they are not mountains, they stand significantly higher than the surrounding terrain. They give parts of Wisconsin a layered look when viewed from a distance, somewhat similar to certain Midwestern foothill environments. 24. The Wisconsin cranberry bogs represent one of the largest concentrations of acidic wetlands in the nation. Central Wisconsin's cranberry growing regions rely on naturally acidic wetlands, which resemble flat, water-controlled environments with sandy soil and specific drainage characteristics. These bogs are widespread, covering thousands of acres. Their flatness and soil composition make them visually striking compared to the surrounding farmland. From above, the bogs look like a series of geometric shapes filled with water during the harvest season. The landscape created by these bogs is unique, and few states have such a large stretch of land dedicated to this type of wetland environment. 23. Wisconsin's northern lakes hold exceptionally clear water due to their glacial origins. Glacial lakes in northern Wisconsin tend to be deep, cold, and naturally filtered by surrounding forests and sandy deposits. Their clarity can rival alpine lakes, with visibility that extends well below the surface. These lakes were carved by glaciers that scoured the land, leaving depressions that filled with clean meltwater. Compared to shallower southern lakes, northern lakes maintain their clarity because less sediment washes into them. The difference is so noticeable that even casual observers comment on how transparent the water appears. 22. The state's river valleys create natural wind tunnels. Some of Wisconsin's major river valleys, such as those along the Wisconsin River and Mississippi River, create natural corridors where wind travels faster and more consistently. The steep sides of certain valleys funnel air in a way that resembles a natural ventilation system. This phenomenon also affects temperature, as moving air can cool river valleys faster during certain times of the year. Anyone analyzing wind patterns in Wisconsin quickly notices that valleys have distinct airflow compared to open plains. 21. Wisconsin's water table is among the highest in the Midwest. In many parts of the state, groundwater sits close to the surface, sometimes only a few feet below. This high water table contributes to the abundance of wetland, springs, ponds, and streams. It also explains why digging deep basements can be difficult in certain areas. The high water table helps maintain lush vegetation and supports wildlife habitats across the landscape. Compared to states with deeper water levels underground, Wisconsin's water is far more accessible and visible in its geography. 20. The state's mix of hardwood and conifer forests creates distinct ecological boundaries. Wisconsin sits at a transition point where northern conifer forests meet central and southern hardwood forests. This overlap produces noticeable boundaries where tree species shift dramatically. On one side of a county road, you might see tall pines, and on the other, broadleaf oaks and maples. And these boundaries are easier to spot in Wisconsin than in many other states because the shift occurs over relatively short distances. 19. The shores of Lake Michigan create their own mini-climate. Communities along Lake Michigan experience milder winters and cooler summers than inland regions. This is due to the lake's ability to absorb heat and release it slowly, moderating temperatures. The effect can be so pronounced that certain trees bloom earlier or later, depending on how far they sit from the shoreline. Fog, wind direction, and humidity are also influenced by the lake. Even a 20-minute drive inland can reveal a noticeable temperature difference, making the shoreline feel like a geographical world of its own. 18. Wisconsin's natural sand barrens rival those of much larger states. Certain areas in central and northern Wisconsin contain large sand barrens, where glacial outwash left behind sandy, nutrient-poor soils. These barrens create open, dry landscapes that support unique plants and animals adapted to these conditions. The sand can be surprisingly deep in some places, giving the land a desert-like feel despite the surrounding green forests. Compared to states that are known for sandy ecosystems, Wisconsin's barrens hold their own, covering thousands of acres and forming one of the state's most surprising geographical environments. 17. Wisconsin's driftless streams form. Some of the steepest water gradients in the Midwest. In the southwestern part of Wisconsin, the terrain drops sharply into narrow valleys carved by streams flowing through the driftless landscape. These streams are unusual for the region because they descend more rapidly than most Midwestern waterways, creating surprisingly steep gradients. When mapped by geographers, they show a quick shift from ridge to valley floor, resembling water systems found in more mountainous states. The result is a landscape where streams twist tightly, run fast, and carve V-shaped channels. 16. The Niagara Escarpment passes directly through Wisconsin's eastern edge. Running through Door County and beneath parts of eastern Wisconsin is the Niagara Escarpment, a long limestone ridge that also extends into several other states and Canada. In Wisconsin, this escarpment rises as a natural wall of rock that subtly but powerfully shapes the region's topography. The escarpment dictates how groundwater moves, how valleys form, and where certain plant species grow. Its exposed cliffs and hidden slopes create microhabitats unique to this region. While not towering, the escarpment is long, continuous, and influential, guiding the shape of the land in ways that are easy to miss unless you analyze the elevation and bedrock layers closely. 15. The Mississippi River shapes Wisconsin's entire western border with complex side channels. Although the Mississippi is the official boundary, the western edge of Wisconsin is more than a simple river line. The river branches into multiple channels, creates backwaters, forms islands, and spreads into marsh complexes. This produces an intricate border that includes sloughs, oxbow lakes, and seasonal floodplains. When viewed from above, the boundary looks like a maze of waterlogged shapes rather than a clean-cut line. 14. Wisconsin's Central Sands region is one of the largest sandy aquifer systems in the United States. Beneath the Central Sands region lies a vast aquifer fed by water that flows easily through deep layers of sand. This sandy terrain was left by glacial meltwater, creating one of the most permeable landscapes in the Midwest. Water moves quickly through the ground here, making the aquifer highly responsive to precipitation changes. The landscape above includes open fields, pine plantations, cranberry bogs, and scrubby barrens. Few states with similar climates have such an expansive sandy system, and geographers often note the region's unusual combination of dry surface conditions and abundant groundwater. 13. Wisconsin's Ice Age Trail follows one of the most distinct glacial boundaries in North America. The Ice Age Trail traces the edge of the most recent glacial advance across Wisconsin, following a line that separates glaciated terrain from older, untouched landscapes. This boundary is visible on maps because it marks where glaciers sculpted plains, left behind hills, or deposited rock debris. On one side of the trail, the land may appear smooth and rolling. On the other, it becomes rugged, steep, or irregular. This sharp geographical divide is uncommon across such a small area. Wisconsin is one of the few states where the imprint of glacial edges remains this easy to see and interpret. 12. The state's bay systems act as natural water collectors. Green Bay and Chequamegon Bay are two major bay systems that shape Wisconsin's geography. These bays act as massive collectors of runoff, sediments, and nutrients from surrounding watersheds. And their shapes determine how currents move, how sediments settle, and how water levels fluctuate. Because bays are sheltered compared to open lake areas, they also experience calmer wave action, creating different shoreline patterns than the wider lakes. 11. Wisconsin's pitted outwash. Plains contain hundreds of water-filled depressions. Created by melting ice blocks buried in glacial sediment, Wisconsin's pitted outwash plains contain countless depressions that fill with groundwater or rainfall. These depressions vary widely in shape and depth, forming kettle ponds, seasonal wetlands, and isolated pools. From above, these plains resemble a dotted surface where water and land intermingle in a mosaic pattern. This type of landscape is distinctive because the depressions are often close together but differ significantly in size. Many states with glacial histories do not have outwash plains as heavily dotted or extensive as those found in Wisconsin. Before we get to the 10 facts that corroborate what I told you at the beginning, remember to subscribe to the channel and give it a like to become experts in American geography. 10. The state features large pine barrens that resemble coastal sand ecosystems. Northern and northwestern Wisconsin contain expansive pine barrens formed on sandy, nutrient-poor soils. These barrens support vegetation similar to that found in coastal regions, despite being far from any ocean. Their open, sunny expanses contrast sharply with the dense forest nearby. The sandy layers create warm surface temperatures and rapid drainage, shaping which plants can survive. Although northern climates typically support thick woodlands, these barrens create an environment where wide open landscapes dominate. Their resemblance to dune or scrub habitats from distant coasts makes them one of Wisconsin's most geographically surprising features. 9. Wisconsin's lake-rich landscape makes it one of the most freshwater-dense states. Northern Wisconsin alone contains thousands of lakes created by glaciers scraping depressions into the land. Even small counties may contain hundreds of distinct water bodies. These lakes vary from deep, clear basins to shallow, marsh-rimmed pools. When mapped, the region looks like a cluster of shining dots covering entire counties. Few states outside of Minnesota and Michigan have as dense a lake distribution. The presence of so many lakes affects everything from local humidity patterns to soil moisture levels, shaping the geography in subtle but consistent ways. 8. The state's rock formations range from sandstone bluffs to ancient quartzite ridges. Wisconsin includes sandstone cliffs, basalt outcrops, dolomite shelves, and quartzite ridges. This variety results from different geological processes that occurred across time, leaving the state with one of the most diverse rock foundations in the central United States. The sandstone formations form towering pillars and cliffs, while quartzite ridges create narrow, elevated backbones across the landscape. 7. Lake Michigan's waves create some of the most dynamic inland dune systems in the nation. Along Wisconsin's eastern coastline, large freshwater dunes rise from beaches and form rolling hills of fine sand. These dunes shift subtly over time due to wind patterns and wave action. The presence of tall dunes along an inland lake is unusual in many parts of the world, but Wisconsin's position along Lake Michigan allows wind to accumulate and shape sand into prominent ridges. Their form and movement make them dynamic features that geographers closely track. Compared to most Midwestern coastlines, Wisconsin's dunes stand out for their size and complexity. 6. Wisconsin's marsh complexes work like enormous natural filters. Across the state, vast marsh complexes collect runoff, slow the flow of water, and filter sediments through dense plant growth. These marshlands are especially prominent in central Wisconsin, where flat terrain and shallow groundwater create ideal conditions for wetland formation. Their filtering abilities help maintain the clarity of nearby lakes and rivers. These marshes also act as natural flood buffers by absorbing excess water and releasing it slowly. When compared with similar ecosystems in other states, Wisconsin's marshes are especially extensive and interconnected, forming a network of wetland environments that define entire regions. 5. The state's topography creates a patchwork of microhabitats. Wisconsin's landforms include plains, hills, bluffs, wetlands, dunes, valleys, and forests packed together in a relatively compact area. Each feature supports different soils, moisture levels, and sunlight conditions, creating countless microhabitats across the state. This geographical variety allows species with very specific needs to survive in close proximity. Even small changes in slope or elevation can create noticeable differences in vegetation. 4. Wisconsin's weather patterns are heavily shaped by its two Great Lakes. Lake Michigan and Lake Superior influence Wisconsin's climate by moderating temperatures, redirecting winds, and altering precipitation. The lakes create distinct weather zones, especially along the coastlines, where fog, lake breezes, and sudden temperature shifts are common. The lakes also enhance snowfall in certain areas by supplying moisture to passing cold fronts. These localized effects make Wisconsin's weather more variable than many inland states of similar latitude. 3. The state's geographical center lies in a forested region rather than an open plain. Wisconsin's exact geographical center is located in a forested rolling region rather than a flat or open area. This center sits within a landscape shaped by glacial deposits and covered by mixed woods. Because many states have their geographic centers in farmland, prairies, or plains, Wisconsin's forested center is somewhat unusual. The surrounding environment includes small hills, streams, and wetlands, which all reflect the state's broader blend of terrain types. This central location is a reminder that forests dominate much of Wisconsin's interior geography. 2. The state's elevation peaks in the north, but slopes gently southward. While Wisconsin does not have towering mountains, its highest elevations occur in the northern portion of the state, where rolling hills and ridges rise above the surrounding land. From there, the terrain gradually slopes downward toward the southern border. This gradual descent shapes river flow and soil distribution. The subtle change in elevation is large enough to influence temperature and rainfall patterns, with northern regions tending to remain cooler and wetter. Compared with states with dramatic peaks, Wisconsin's elevation profile is modest, but it still plays a significant geographical role. 1. Wisconsin's landscape is a meeting point of multiple geological regions. Wisconsin sits at the convergence of glaciated terrain, unglaciated hills, sandy outwash plains, limestone escarpments, and ancient bedrock formations. This combination creates a state where multiple geologic stories intersect across relatively short distances. The land shifts from smooth plains to rugged hills, from wetland networks to hardwood forests, and from sandy barrens to lake-dotted wilderness. This convergence explains why Wisconsin contains such a wide variety of landforms without requiring a large land area. It is a geographical crossroads where natural forces have layered complexity into every region. Now that you know these 50 facts about Wisconsin, tell us which one did you like the most or which one surprised you the most. We'd love to read your opinion in the comments and see how many of us picked the same number. And something else many of us will probably agree on is watching the video I'm leaving on screen, because we all love sharing and learning interesting facts. And that's exactly what this video is all about. But before you watch it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give it a like. Otherwise, we might not see each other again.